it was like a tsunami of glass. That's the way I describe it. I've never been in a tsunami, but just what I know of tsunamis, it was just like glass and just this kind of chaos of, I literally was just staring at two different shoes going back and forth between the two of them. And then I look up and there's just glass everywhere.
This is the How She Moms podcast with Whitney Archibald. I'm a mother of 5 on a mission to help moms connect with your kids, manage your homes, and create your own unique version of motherhood. I curate ideas from different moms so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. This is a really hard episode to introduce. I'm usually not a fan of spoilers, but I'm going to tell you up front that this is a story about losing a child. It's a hard story, but it's also a beautiful story of love, hope, and kindness. It's an important story that I've wanted to share with you since I first started How She Moms. I first met Meghann Guentensberger about 4 years ago in their elementary school library. She was a librarian and I was a volunteer. I immediately wanted to be her friend and talk about books and writing all day long. Later that year, she and her daughter Rylie were in a tragic accident, and suddenly everyone in our little community knew Meghann, her husband Ziggy, and her son Tanner, as we rallied around them and Rylie. I'm going to let Meghann take over and use her beautiful gift with words to tell her story of the accident, her family's journey through grief, and her mission to follow Rylie's example of spreading love and kindness by starting a nonprofit organization called Rylie's ARC, which stands for Acts of Random Kindness. Before we get into Megann's story, I'd like to thank Baby Trend for sponsoring this podcast. When they shipped me their new car seat to try out, I hadn't realized how many strong opinions I have about car seats. Many of them claim to be compatible for a wide age range, but this new seat from Baby Trend, the Cover Me 4-in-1 convertible car seat, takes it to the next level. The inserts for infants, which they call the comfort cabins, are truly secure and comfortable even for tiny newborns, and my 5-year-old fit great when I converted it up all the way to a comfy booster seat. It's approved all the way from 4 pounds to 100. My son especially loves the cup holders and the sun canopy, which is actually quite sturdy and has a nice feel to it, unlike the flimsy ones we've had in the past. Not many booster seats can also shield from the sun. What I like about it is that it's really intuitive to install and change to the different heights and positions, both rear and forward facing. It has clear diagrams right on the seat so you don't have to dig out the manual to wrangle it into the car. And the great news is that it's affordable, even though it has a premium feel. The regular retail price of this seat is only $149, but How She Moms listeners can also get 20% off when you buy it from babytrend.com and use the code COVERME20 with a capital C and capital M. And since my own kids are almost out of the car seat phase and can get by with the 2 booster seats we have left, I partnered with Megann's organization, Rylie's ARC, to find a good home for this awesome Baby Trend seat with a family that can use it all the way from an infant seat on up. Now it's time for Meghann to tell her story.
So 4 years ago on the 29th of April was one of those crazy Colorado days where it had snowed, but then it was going to melt and be nice. You know, one of those, but you woke up and were like, what am I going to do today? And Ziggy said to us, hey, why don't you take Rylie and go run some errands? You need to get some new running shoes. Just have a girls' day. So we started off to do the girls' day with the intent of like, let's go get some shoes. And she wanted to go to Target and get some new mascara. And, you know, we were going to have some lunch because he's like, go have lunch, make a day of it. Please get out of my house. Right. Yeah, so we went running around, went to a couple different stores. Then I was like, let's go to one more running store, which was R&K, which is my normal running store. And so we're there. Rylie's trying on shoes too. And there was a woman in the parking lot who had a medical emergency. And she passed out at the wheel. And when she did that, hit the accelerator, and her car drove through the storefront. And it was like a tsunami of glass. That's the way I describe it. I've never been in a tsunami, but just what I know of tsunamis, it was just like glass and just this kind of chaos of, I literally was just staring at two different shoes going back and forth between the two of them. And then I look up and there's just glass everywhere. And then the next thing I remember is kind of everything had stopped and I was pinned against the back wall of the store, like the very far back room. And there was a car at my shins. And I'm looking up and I see the owner of the store kind of like on top of some shelves. And he and I are talking, trying to figure it all out. And we can't find Rylie. But I can see some other people starting to move, like some people had kind of gotten out of the way. And I can see I can't see sirens. I can see lights from emergency vehicles. And then at that point, the whole like mom instinct has kicked in hardcore. And I'm trying to find Rylie, but I can't find Rylie. And we are both just in this like, what has happened, but adrenaline and all of that. And I hear something, which both Trent and I decide is his fiancée, Jackie. And so I'm talking to the noises that I hear. Meanwhile, trying to like wedge the door open so that like I can get out and try to find Rylie's all that's on my mind. And then the police and the fire, EMS, all those people are there. They get the door open and get me out, at which point I'm like, you have to find Rylie. Like, I can't find Rylie. Where's Rylie? Those kinds of questions. And I say, but I heard somebody down here, and I think it might be Jackie, but I don't know where Rylie is. One of the officers kind of walks me away. One of the most distinct memories is standing in puddles because I had shoes on, and I think I don't remember if I'd taken them off, but anyway, I was literally standing in my socks in puddles of melted snow. And then one of the officers walks me away. I hear one officer say, get her out of here, walks me away. And I'm like, what is going on? And I tell the officer I have to call my husband. So we walk next door through the back door of Papa Murphy's. They let me use their phone to call my husband. And I am telling him, like, there's been an accident. We can't find Rylie. We're at the store. He jumps into action. At that point, when the officer had said, get her out of here, they had found Rylie. Later, piecing things together, I realized that the noises I heard were most likely Rylie. Mm-hmm. And she was pinned beneath the front wheel of the car, kind of down somewhere in my shin region, I think. And a lot of it's just really vague because our bodies protect us from trauma like that. Yeah. And one of the police officers or a couple of police officers kind of lift the car and lift Rylie. I'm not sure. I wasn't physically there in that moment. Get her in an ambulance. Meanwhile, I've then gotten shooed to the kind of the front of the store area. And another EMS person says to me, you're Rylie's mom, right? Yep. Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions. Answer them right. You can sit in the front seat of my vehicle and I'll get you there because I'm headed to the same hospital. So he kind of coached me through. Forever will be my hero of that day because he knew exactly what to say to me. We got there. They got her stable enough to drive her to Children's of Aurora. And that started a 28-day stay at the hospital while we prayed and hoped and everything to see how she would recover or if she would recover. The crazy thing to me is, like, through it all, her brain was severely damaged, but you can't see that, right? She had a broken clavicle. That was it. Like, physical damage, broken clavicle. And she had there was a really big wound on her head. But by the time we actually got to see her at Children's, they had a plastic surgeon in there who stitched her up. I mean, she had a big old, scar stitch thing. And that was like the first several days was really getting into that of like how much pressure is in her brain, how much damage has been done. And those days were ones where I was optimistic. I'm optimistic by nature. Like, that's just who I am. So I was like, it's going to be fine. We're going to get through this. Things may be very different, but it's going to be good. Ziggy met with the chief neurologist at one point, and the neurologist showed him pictures from the MRI or the CT, whichever one it was, and like explained what we were seeing. I mean, it's all gray. Right. So you're like, oh, there's a bunch of gray stuff on the screen. And there was a lot of dead area and a lot of really damaged, we don't know if it's going to make it area. But that's where Ziggy would tell you that he knew that it wasn't going to end well. But he was like, let's see what we can, we're going to fight. We're going to do whatever. So we spent every day for 28 days there. And we're so lucky to have people that set us up with a hotel room across the street so we could at least shower. I mean, Children's has facilities for that, but it was just nice to be able to like physically leave the space, take a shower, that you weren't like worried about the next person who had to get in there. And Ziggy slept most nights there. I slept almost every night at the hospital. The one night or 2 nights I didn't, Ziggy, we swapped. Yeah. And so we spent 28 days there with the staff who have become like family to us, and watched as things progressed. It became evident at one point, like, the only response Rylie had was to pain. They would come and put like a flashlight or something hard just on her cuticles and push. And, that's just a tender area anyway. Yeah. And she would sometimes respond to that. But if you tried to like tickle or anything more gentle, music, there was no response to any of that. And I think one of the hardest days of our lives was when we sat down in a care conference with all of our doctors. And it was just to try to say, like, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. What are the next steps? And at one point, we had some people say, we could set up an ICU in your living room, but we don't know if she'll ever get off these machines. We don't know if she'll ever respond to anything other than pain. So Ziggy and I went into this care conference, and we had some of the doctors and staff say to us, wow, we've never had anyone come in and run it like a board meeting, but we just kind of came in with our non-negotiables. And I read a story once about Rick and Dick Hoyt, who do Ironmans and run marathons together. And the dad, runs for Rick, or ran, he just died recently, but runs for him because it was like the only time his son felt alive, because he had, I think it was cerebral palsy. I can't remember exactly what it was, and was able to communicate with his dad via computer, and was like, when we run together, I feel alive. And so I'd read that book. I'd shared it with Rylie. And so in that meeting, I said, I will do everything. I will push her. I will pull her in an Ironman. I will do whatever, if she can experience some level of joy and interact with her environment. And if you tell us that she's not going to be able to interact with her environment in any way, shape, or form, like that's not quality of life. And at that point, it felt really selfish to us. Like, yes, we could keep her plugged in like a computer, but she can't interact. So we went through so much, and there's so much that they can't say. There's just medical rules and regulations. And so at that point we said, let's see what she can do on her own. Let's see if we can get her off of enough medication that maybe she would have more of a chance of interacting with her surroundings. Or let's see if she can breathe on her own. Let's see what she can do. Her body was really strong, but her brain was not. So we extubated her, and that was the longest 40 hours of my life, as she fought to try to breathe on her own, but wasn't able to maintain it. And just watching and praying and hoping and like, what could we do? How can we keep her going? Because she was so vibrant. 28 days before, she'd been doing burpees that morning. But ultimately, what we assumed was going to happen happened, and she took her last breath, and we had to say goodbye. And it was awful.
Throughout this whole hospital stay, I was part of the whole community of people at our school and in our town, following Rylie's progress and praying for Rylie and her family. Rylie's favorite color was blue, so our school had a Rally for Rylie Day where everyone wore blue in support of Rylie and raised funds for medical expenses. Local businesses and organizations also helped raise funds, and because Rylie loved to run and loved the color blue, people started painting running shoes blue and leaving them around all over town. Most of all, we were all reading Meghann and Ziggy's updates on the Facebook page they started. I asked Meghann what that time of waiting felt like for her.
There was a lot of thinking, and when I think, I write. So I had lots of little journals and notebooks around. I had my computer around. We had people in our room almost all the time with us. So we kind of had this steady stream of visitors. Yeah, so there was just a lot of processing, and I started writing. We had a Facebook page set up, and that became both, it served our community because it was very public. People knew what was going on and wanted to help and wanted to know, but we couldn't answer 8 million texts. I mean, Ziggy woke up the morning after the accident to like 350 texts from people, and he was like, whoa, can't do this. Yeah. So we set up that Facebook page, and then that became it was a gift to us because it allowed us to sit, Ziggy and I could process together, figure out what we were going to say, and send it out. And then our community knew, but we only had to say it one time. But it's one of those, I look back and I wonder if I hadn't had to write it down like that, if I would have been able to kind of process what was happening as well. I was in denial until right before we extubated her and everything. And even then I was like, no, it's going to be fine. I'm going to take her on an Ironman and, that kind of a thing. But it was really good too, because I look at some friends that I've met in this journey after losing her that have lost a kid like that, just a blink of an eye. And I feel like I was given kind of a gift of easing into it. I could kind of start to see the writing on the wall, and I could kind of more mentally prepare or steel myself for the inevitable.
From the other side, for friends, family, and communities in situations like this, it can be hard to know how to help. So I asked Meghann what other people did during this time that helped and supported her and her family the most.
What has really stood out to me and that I've had to remember in the years since, because things will happen and you're like, oh, what do I do? Do I make a meal? Yes, meals are great, and we all need to eat. So that was lovely that we didn't have to eat out every time. And gift cards were given to us so that we could eat more than just the hospital food. So that was beautiful. But it was people being present. And I think that is, even myself, when something happens and you just want to get into action, sometimes it's really just better to I'm just going to sit here with you. Or I'm going to text you, every morning and say good morning, and I'm going to send you a silly picture halfway through the day, and I'm going to say good night or whatever it is. And instead of feeling like we have to make a meal or get the house cleaner or shuffle the kids back and forth, all of those were wonderful. But it was just knowing that there were people alongside us in a way, and that we weren't forgotten. Because, the first few days, of course, we weren't forgotten. But as it approached a month, people have to get back to their real lives. And we couldn't necessarily have our best friends sitting with us at the hospital for a month. But we just still knew that people were present and that they were willing to sit with us. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people, too, is because you go in and you feel like you should be doing something for them, or you should be filling the space with words or activities or let's play cards or whatever. And sometimes, most of the time, we didn't have capacity for that. And so it was the people who were just present and didn't expect us to be entertaining them or doing anything. And they were just like, hey, you know what? I brought my computer. I'm going to do my work over here. I just wanted to be nearby. And that was beautiful because it also freed me up to be like, oh, good, I don't have to entertain you. Yeah. So things like that. Somebody brought us a blanket, like a fuzzy blanket, and that was my favorite gift ever because the hospital temperatures get weird, and I spent so much time there, and it was like blanket on, blanket off, blanket on, And I think another thing that really stood out to me is we had a couple of friends who just kind of took it upon themselves to gather resources, because in those moments of tragedy, whether it's like a death tragedy or just some sort of accident or trauma or whatever, everyone is oh, if you need anything, let me know. But when you actually need it, you're like, I don't know who said what to me.
Right.
So having someone that just like corrals all those resources that says, hey, if you actually need someone to get your kid from school, call these two people. Or if you need your house cleaned, these people said they would come over and do it. Or if the garden needs to be weeded, and when you get into a month, all of a sudden those things like, maybe I should sweep the floor and get the extra dog hair off of it. I didn't have capacity to do that, but somebody took care of it for me.
Another good friend took charge of their son Tanner's care.
We have some really great friends that just adopted him, and they said he's staying with us. And they changed the guest room. It was Tanner's room. And then Ziggy's dad came in from Michigan with the intent of letting Tanner be at home and have more of a regular thing. But it ended up that Tanner was more comfortable at our friend's house, so we just kind of let him do that. And then Ziggy's dad, helped us take care of the dogs and just kind of kept things going. And he would come up to the hospital most days and hang out with us and stuff. But for the most part, Tanner was with his buddy, and that was really good because then he could still go to school. He could, go to hockey practice and do some of those things that felt more normal, which was important at that time.
And then, of course, there was the nursing staff.
We had some of the best staff, nurses, doctors, the whole 9 yards while we were at Children's. And they cared for not just Rylie, they cared for each one of us. They got to know Tanner and his mismatched socks and that he played hockey, and every time he would come in, they would give him special attention. And we were really lucky. The child life specialist did amazing things with him and Rylie. Like, we have a mold of their hands together. So we were able to prep him. He wasn't there that day because he was only 11. But yeah, one of our nurses knew exactly how to be sarcastic and harass Ziggy so that he would laugh. And then another one knew exactly how to invite me into caring for Rylie because there was nothing I could do. But I'll never forget the night that one of the nurses said, do you want to just wash her hair? And I was like, yes, I do. And so that last day, the night before she died, we had a nurse who was newer, and she was one of our regular nurses, but she had lost her brother, if I remember correctly. So there was a lot of she was dealing with a lot of emotions because we all knew it was just a matter of time at that point. And we'd had kind of just a rough night. She was taking great care of us, but we were both just like, ugh. And then that morning, one of our nurses came in, another one that had been on the regular care team, and she was like a little angel and just came in and started moving things around. And she was like, oh, well, we don't need this plugged in anymore. And she would unplug this and move more things out and just get it to feel more homey. And so she was the one that unplugged the monitors and said, why are we watching the numbers? We don't need to. She had the numbers in her nursing station, but we didn't need to watch those numbers. And so she was able to make those last couple of hours with Rylie feel even more normal, if that's even a way to call it. And then when Rylie passed, she was efficient but caring. And, she swept my parents out of the room and just left Ziggy and I in there. And then she came in and she's like, okay, I think you each should have time alone. And just was masterminding that whole time. Because at that point, empty isn't even a good enough word. So she helped us navigate all of that and then helped us pack up the room after they took Rylie away. And we had the best decorated room on the whole floor. With a friend of mine had come in and brought greenery, and we had cards hanging from all the people at school, and just so much stuff everywhere. And so they came in and helped us pack it all up and put it in their cute little red wagons. And we somehow drove home in just kind of this fog of both like a stupor as well as relief, which can sound kind of crass, but it was just like, okay, we at least know now, Rylie is gone. We couldn't wrap our head around that, but we at least knew like she was in a better place, which I really hate that saying, but like it felt like it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And we went home, and I remember it was 6 or 7 at night that I wrote the post that said, we said goodbye to her today at 1:13, I think it was. And then woke up the next morning and saw how many people had commented and shared and everything else that post. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like,
it's big.
It is big. Yeah.
Then came the next day, and then the next, and they moved forward. One of the ways they did this was by following through with the plan they hatched while they were still in the hospital.
We would get all these visits from people and messages on Facebook and all of that of little things that Rylie had done. She was just known for doing simple things, whether it was like leaving a note and sliding it in the cracks of the locker, or opening a teacher's drawer and tucking it under something, or baking something at night and bringing a taste of it to somebody. Like that was just kind of her thing. And so as a parent, I knew those things, but you kind of are just like, oh, isn't that cute? And you move on with your life. But all these stories kept coming to us. And one day, it was one of the nicer days, my parents were at the hospital, and they said, why don't you and Ziggy just go take a walk? Like, get some fresh air, see the sun, do those things. So we went for a walk on the campus, and there is a section where like the medical classes each year dedicate a paver in this garden area thing. And there was a paver with Gandhi's quote that said, in a gentle way, you can shake the world. And Ziggy and I were just walking, and we saw that quote, and we had been talking about what was probably going to happen and all the things we'd heard. And Ziggy stopped, and he's like, I think we have to do something with this. And it was just kind of that idea that nothing Rylie did was outlandish. There was no pomp and circumstance to it. It was just these gentle little things that she would do that then affected people. And then they were coming and telling us, things that maybe they wouldn't have necessarily zeroed in on had the tragedy not happened, but that with that lens was like, oh, wow, she really turned my day around, or she did this thing. And so that was kind of when Rylie's arc hatched, that plan. And after she died and we had come home, we had to start thinking about like, what were we going to do, our celebration of life wise? How were we going to commemorate, which is a terrible word, but, what were we going to do? And we knew that it had been really well publicized and a lot of people were coming. So then we were like, we can't just go to the local church and do this thing like it's going to be a big deal. So we started planning her celebration of life, which we did at the MAC, and hundreds of people came, and that was the momentum we wanted to carry on. And so that's where Rylie's arc and acts of random kindness is like, if she can do this by sliding a note in a door, we as a community can do that a millionfold.
Yeah.
Our first real thing was Rylie's run, which was at the year anniversary. And that was kind of my sister's idea initially, because she just was like, we should do something. It's the year. It's going to be a hard day for a lot of people. It was a hard day. It falls in a really cruddy time for me as a mom, because it spans Mother's Day, and it's a 28-day period we relive every year. So Rylie's Run was born as just a way to bring that community together and thank them for our support and honor people that we love. And to this day, we still set up Memory Mile, where people make posters of people that they've lost, and it's like the last mile of the run. And it's just a chance to really come together and say, hey, there's some really great people that aren't physically here with us every day, but that are on our hearts every day. And it celebrates the community that held us up. And so it's really one of our favorite events, just because it's, who doesn't want to get out, move around a little bit, enjoy some food and a beverage, and also be with people they love.
Rylie's Ark has continued to grow and has turned into a nonprofit organization and a major force for good in the community. The whole family is involved in the organization, and Meghann has decided to step back from teaching so she can focus on running Rylie's Ark.
It's been a gift because it's good for all sorts of people, myself included, but it gives me a tangible way to grieve, but not in a like I'm curled up in a ball crying grief, but just like okay, I can do something with the grief. So really what we are is, it's again about community. So we're a community that creates big impact through small acts of kindness, and we do that in two ways. One way we do that is, as a community, we just are encouraging people to practice kindness intentionally, and those are what we call ripples. So it's holding the door open for someone, looking them in the eye, using their name, maybe buying a cup of coffee for the person behind them, but it's designed to be all the things that we can do that don't have a price tag, but that can really impact others. And those are the things that Rylie would just do naturally. And then the other side of it is that big impact. So we can have a big impact if we're all doing the little things, but sometimes there are things that take a little more oomph. And so as an organization, we rally behind those. Those are the waves. And right now, or we just finished doing our Be Happy Boutique, where we gave away 274 prom dresses to girls around Metro Denver, and heard them giggle and saw them spin in the mirror and light up, and heard so many stories of, I wasn't even going to go to prom this year because I couldn't afford it, but now I can, or I would have rather come here and give you the money that I would normally pay for a dress because I know you're going to do great things with it.
I have to interrupt here because this prom dress event needs a little more explanation. I was lucky enough to be part of this for one of the weekends. This was not simply giving away prom dresses. Our local outlet mall, the outlets at Castle Rock, donated a storefront, and community members donated about 600 prom dresses. They organized them beautifully and set them up just like a regular store with some of the most beautiful dresses you've ever seen. Way bigger and better than a dress section in a department store. I signed up for one shift, helped some amazing girls find their dream dresses, and I was hooked. So I signed up for another shift. The atmosphere was so genuine, and the girls were so thrilled. It was just an incredible experience for everyone. One of the coolest things I've been part of. Later that month, I even saw one of the girls I had helped find a dress when she was actually out on her prom date. It was so magical. Meghann plans to do this for homecoming and prom each year, and she did the same thing with Halloween costumes for kids. Another one of my favorite things Meghann does is to commemorate the 28 days Rylie was in her coma.
We're getting ready to have 28 days of kindness. I do this every year in the 28-day span that Rylie was in the hospital. And the concept is that they are simple acts of kindness that can be tweaked to fit your schedule or to fit your personality, but just that really intentional practice of it. And I try to put it out there so that there's activities on it that families can do. There's activities that a teen could do or a single person could do, like that it's just kind of broad. And I've done different themes over the years, to try to tackle different things, but really just trying to help other people build that practice. It's really not different than yoga. If you don't do yoga regularly, it's really hard. But if you do it a couple times a week, all of a sudden you're stretchy. So it's the same kind of thing with kindness. If we can build that into our daily routine, then you start to notice the effects of it.
I'm going to send a list of the most recent 28 Days of Kindness to everyone on the How She Moms email list next week because it's such a great list. If you'd like to receive that, sign up for my email list at howshemoms.com or just email me at whitney@howshemoms.com. It's just such a good list of ideas to go through with your family. Things like treat someone to one of your favorite things, or hide a gift card somewhere where a stranger can find it with a note, or simply just ask somebody a question about themselves. Although Rylie's Ark does several big things each year, Meghann always goes back to very personal acts of kindness.
We're in the process right now of buying bikes. We have two families that are from Afghanistan that have just been really trying to get their feet under them and working really hard to get jobs and everything, but it's just not like they're not being able to get the traction they need. Between the two families, there's 7 kiddos, and they just really want bikes. So we're in the process of getting bikes, scooters, striders for all 7 of those kids so they can like have summer fun, you know? And that takes the weight off of mom and dad. So they can focus on paying for groceries or paying their electric bill or their rent or mortgage, but we'll bring some joy. And that's really what it's about, is bringing joy to people, especially those that are underheard. And that's the people that aren't asking for help. They're putting their head down. They're going to work really hard to get it done. And we're trying to find those people and bring them joy.
I ended our conversation by asking a hard question. I wanted to know how the accident had changed the way Meghann approaches daily life.
I would erase April 29th, 2017 in a millisecond because I would love to have Rylie back with me. But since I know that's not a reality, I also embrace it as one of the most influential days of my life. Because it was in that moment, or the 28 days especially, where I was just like, wow, everything I focus on doesn't matter. I was a teacher at the time, and I would Tanner would have a hockey game, and I would lug my teacher bag with me with all my papers in it, and I would grade while he was playing hockey, and I would hope that somebody would nudge me when he was on the ice so that I would catch his shift. Or I would be up until whatever hours in the night trying to make the perfect lesson for my students, who I do refer to as my kids, which is important. We need people that give and love their, the school kids like that. But I would get up at 4 a.m. to get my workout in so that I could get all the things done, so that I could be at work for however many hours and then still pretend to be a good mom. But it was all for show. And that might not be the right word, but it was all kind of a facade, I guess. And it was me trying to do the right thing. And when the accident happened, it was like this giant cog in the wheel going, none of that matters. It doesn't matter if I have a perfect lesson or a perfect worksheet, or if a student gets their paper back with 25 comments or 24. That wasn't where I should have been spending my energy. And then I started really doing some soul searching on what am I doing? And I started going to therapy at that time, and just really seeing some of the patterns of behavior that I had, and how I could hold something up like a perfect lesson plan or clean baseboards or an organized cabinet or whatever it was as, look at me, I did this really good thing, instead of the harder thing for me, which was maybe like engaging with my kids or with my husband or with my friends. And so I think that has been the biggest shift for me, is to try to take the badges off, the Girl Scout badges of like, oh, I win this award and this award, is like, it's not about what can be visibly shown to anyone who might actually care, but it's taking the time to have a cup of coffee with a friend on a Tuesday if they or I need it, or it's driving in the car with my son and turning down the music or plugging his phone in and letting him be DJ and tell me about whichever crazy artist that I've never heard of, that kind of a thing. And so that has been the gift and the change for me, is that shift from works or intangible things that I can say, look what I've done, to relationship.
You can find out more about Rylie's Arc and make a donation at ryliesarc.org. You can also follow Rylie's Arc on Instagram and Facebook, and Meghann shares her beautiful writing at meghanguentensberger.com. Thank you for listening to the How She Moms podcast. If you like it, tell a friend. The bigger the community, the more ideas. There are lots of ways you can add your ideas to the How She Moms community. We have a Facebook group where we share ideas about upcoming topics and help each other solve problems we're facing in motherhood. You can also follow How She Moms on Instagram for quick tips and ideas. And you can go to howshemoms.com, where you'll find transcripts of episodes and lots of other great resources. Special thanks to my mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.